Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. I wanted to get back to the oil issue once again. Now, you know, there was from Trump and some of the media, they were talking about how the United States has become energy independent. Well, that's not true whatsoever. Um, in fact, with our current technology, it is literally impossible for the United States to become energy independent. Brent crude, which is most crude sold globally, is heavier and has certain qualities that make it preferable for making diesel fuel, which is what almost all transportation, uh, especially heavy equipment and construction, all this equipment, all pretty much runs on diesel. To replace all of that equipment with equipment that would require a different fuel, even just changing the engines, um, which in some cases may not be doable, would cost many trillions of dollars and take decades to manage to do. So, I mean, if you're talking about buses, freight trucks, um, you know, trains, construction equipment, mining equipment, um, you know, large backup generators. If you're talking about ocean-going vessels, and all runs on diesel fuel. Now, you can take WTI, West Texas Intermediate, and convert it to to diesel fuel, but it takes so much more processing, and the output is lower, and it requires far more additives to be included, that it winds up increasing the cost of diesel fuel so much that you will impact, you know, consumer prices. Consumer prices are tied to the cost of fuel. And so, right now at the pumps, we have seen a 30 to 40 cent increase per gallon for gasoline in the last few weeks. You would think that the oversupply no longer exists. Well, that's not true either. There is so much of an oversupply right now that land-based, um, oil producers are using um, pipelines for storage. And we've got over 100 tankers, oil tankers, sitting off the coast on each side of the country. Grand total over 100 tankers waiting to offload their cargo, even while the storage is completely full and production is still above demand. So, so there's still more being produced than is being sold or used. And yet, the refineries, this is why the fuel prices have gone up, because the refineries have slowed down on processing. They're slowing down on refining, just as we come into the summer months. Right before we hit Memorial Day, they decided they were going to slow down on refining while we have a world history oversupply of oil. Why? Well, you can guess. You know, there are oil companies that are going into bankruptcy. They're already organizing and filing for bankruptcy, especially drilling contractors and so forth. Other large companies are reducing drastically their capital expenditures, meaning how much they are going to spend this year on new hardware, etc. New equipment. Oil field workers and oil workers are being laid off by the tens of thousands. Offshore oil production has pretty much come to a standstill. I mean, it hasn't completely, but it's headed that way. It costs more to produce to extract oil from offshore sources. Basically, if you look at it in a tier and hierarchy, the cost of extracting oil goes, the lowest cost is just simple extraction, drilling and extraction. Then you go up to offshore extraction. Then you go up to Arctic environment extraction. And then you go to, shale oil. And then you go to tar sands. And so that's how much each one costs to extract and produce oil from bottom to top. The original method, just drilling and extracting, is still the least expensive, but it's also the supply which is most exhausted. So as we keep climbing up this ladder on the expense compared to how much oil is selling for, and which is supposed to be based on the demand, which has just become an absolute lie at this point. I mentioned in my video about China that China has drastically reduced their purchase of oil and oil products from the United States. They've also reduced how much they're purchasing from Saudi Arabia, and instead they are purchasing a lot more from Russia. Now, I'm not sure about the weight of Russian oil. I do know they're still buying some Brent from Saudi Arabia, so that may be the same situation, that they have to buy certain forms of oil to keep down the cost of producing end products. but they have absolutely reduced. At one point, they actually completely suspended for several months their purchase of oil from the United States. So this plays into the so-called V-shaped recovery, which is just not going to happen. Is there going to be a recovery? Well, I'm going to take a look at that in another video, but one thing is for certain. This oversupply of oil is not something that is going to go away anytime soon. Not in the next few months, probably not in the next year, maybe 2 years total. Other countries were far ahead of us in reducing their oil production. But even so, once they make an agreement to reduce production, it actually takes months for that reduction to take place. It's not as simple as just, turn off the pumps, because that can destroy equipment. You've got contracts for delivery. You've got many different aspects of the production cycle that have to be worked out. So it's not as simple as just, we're cutting production, so you guys go home. And here in America, when you do tell these guys to go home, well, you're cutting their income, you're cutting their spending, you're reducing the revenue for entire communities. Because typically when they reduce production, they do so in a large amount and close down, shut in, extraction equipment and fields by the whole field, pretty much, in one area. So you impact that geographic area, the cities and towns in that area. So it's not so simple as, just a few people being laid off. You've got like entire towns and cities that are being impacted, and that impacts all of the grocery stores, the gas stations, the rent, the mortgage, everything gets impacted in that area. So you're not affecting just one industry. You're hitting a lot of industries when you lay off lots of people all in one region. Anyway, so when I've talked about the international trade on oil, and yes, it still stands true, even if we switched to other forms of energy. The existence of the petrodollar, which is how the dollar gets its value, we would still be trading oil on the international market. We would still be exporting and importing oil, even if we didn't need to for technological reasons. We would still be doing so because it props up the value of the dollar. Historically. Recently, like it or not, this is not what's really going on here. Uh, the value of the dollar is being propped up more by threats, sanctions, warfare, and theft of resources. But that is coming to an end. All right, so please share this video, talk about these subjects. If you can, then please donate $1 a month to help me expand the channel. And I hope you have a good day. And that's it for this one. I'll still be doing more today.